This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek. This is the generation of them.
And if you could put it to the first slide also.
This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom, bienvenidos. We want to welcome everyone as you are here in our congregation, and especially those of you that are coming in through our YouTube channel. And we want you to subscribe to our channel and be able to, we will give you notifications when we're on. So please do subscribe, and thank you for the blessings that you give us financially that you are sending through our website. We just want to thank you for that, because especially through this pandemic, it was very hard for us, and so we want to make sure that you know that we are grateful and that we are thankful for the gifts that you have given us. The first one. Today we are in Parsha Beha'alotcha. This is the pronunciation. Now, this is a very hard word, and one of the keys to learning Hebrew is to divide the word into syllables. Learning Hebrew in syllables is easy, and we could learn to read. This is actually in biblical Hebrew, this is a 3-syllable word. In modern Hebrew, this is a 5-syllable word. So modern Hebrew changes the syllabification of the words, but in Hebrew, this is Beha'alotcha. Beha'alotcha. And what Beha'alotcha means when you set up, it's about setting up. The next one. It's on. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we just go to chapter 8 of the book of Numbers, and we'll start there with verse 1. We'll start with verse 1 here. We are in Numbers 8:1, and it says there, Yahweh spoke to Moses, and he said, say this to Aaron when you set up the lamps. The 7 lamps must throw their light towards the front of the lampstand. And so he said there, when you set up your lamps, so when you set up the lamps in your uplifting, when you set them up, he says all the lamps must throw their light towards the front. And so here is a picture of the menorah that is in display in Israel, in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem today. And of course, this is made out of pure gold. And we are told when you set up, when you Beha'alotcha, set up, when you rise them up, the lamps must throw their light towards the front of the lampstand. Now, a menorah is this lampstand up to here, up to there. And those were just platforms, and each individual light was taken on and off. These were lamps. Here's a closer view of them. And this is just a lampstand. And these were individual lamps that were just set on top of the menorah. The word lamp is the word na'ed, and nir, tamid is the perpetual lamps, and because they were perpetually to be on. And of course, it was 7 lamps, Shavuot norot. And then el mul penai means that their light must shine towards the front. Now, here is a cutout view of the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Of course, the Holy of Holies has this curtain all the way across. It's taken off just to show you what's behind the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was just a little room with the Ark of the Covenant. Of course, there's a cutout view of what's inside, the 10 Commandments, and the glory, the kavod, in between the 2 cherubim. And then the curtain went all the way across. And right in front of the curtain was the altar of incense. And then on the south side was the menorah. And then on the north side was a table of showbread. What's interesting is that we saw here that the lamps were to be towards the front. El mul penai. The word penai means face, that they are facing forward. And so the lamps would be here, would face forward and bring their light here. And again, this is the table of showbread. What's interesting about the table of showbread, there was 12 loaves of bread, 12 loaves of unleavened cakes. And the word showbread is actually the bread of the presence, or the bread of the face, of the presence, the face of Adonai. So the menorah faced the bread, and the bread faced the menorah. Very much like the cherubim, they faced each other. And the glory, the kavod of Adonai was in the midst of the 2 cherubim facing each other, and the altar of incense was in between to the west of the menorah and the table of showbread facing each other. And so the lamps are to bring out the light of Adonai. The lamps that Adonai gave us in reflecting his glory, it is as the face of Adonai showing us his light. And when Yeshua says, I am the light of the world, Yeshua is the light of the world. He's the one that shines out. And interesting enough, not only is Yeshua the light of the world, but one thing that's important is he says, you are the light of the world. So as Yeshua is a menorah, as Yeshua is a menorah, so we should be menorot. We should be little menorahs in a sense. He brings us his light. And now that we are studying also in post-Pentecost, we are post-Pentecost. Last week, we celebrated Shavuot Pentecost, and it was when the fire, the light of Adonai came upon the believers, and that multiplied to the 120, to the 3,000, 5,000, and then more and more. The light of Adonai was brought in through Yeshua to the world. I am the light of the world, Yeshua says. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And he is what gives light to this world. Without Yeshua, there is darkness. And think of darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. Now, Adonai lives in light, in bright light. But think of it, when he created the world, he created this box. He created a box. Outside of the box was eternity, was Adonai. But he created this box, and notice that when he created the box, he created the box, time and space. He created in darkness. It says, and there was darkness over the face of the deep. When he created the earth, the heavens and the earth, he created them dark. And that first day that he created the earth in darkness just started rotating. But then, right away, he says, let there be light. Yehi or, be light. Vayehi or, and there was light. So in the midst of the darkness that he created this world in darkness. But then the first thing he does, he speaks forth. And the Vad is the word, which is Yeshua. Yeshua is the word of Elohim. So when Yahweh spoke, the Father spoke, and he said, be light. Yeshua, the word was spoken, and light became. And Elohim is light. And Yeshua says, I am the light of the world. In a sense, Yeshua is the need of the world, the ner tamid of the world. And he's the one that is the only perpetual light. But he tells us, you be the light of the world. As I am in the world, I am the light of the world. But you are also the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. A city up there on top cannot be hid because the light shines out. You don't get a light, you don't get a lamp and then put it under a basket. No, you let it shine out. Especially in dark nights, we don't turn off the lights, we turn on the lights so that we could see where we're going. And the world can see where they're going only when Yeshua is lit. Only when Yeshua is lit. But then Yeshua calls us to be these lights. So think of every one of you. You bring light to those around you. And the light you bring is the light of Messiah. And so even in the Mishkan, Adonai wants there to be light there. And Adonai gives us this teaching on the lamp. And notice that in verse 4, it says, the lampstand, the menorah, had been made according to the pattern, according to the blueprint Yahweh had shown to Moses. And remember, the blueprint of this holy place and Holy of Holies is only a model of the real one in heaven. Now, if you want to know what heaven's like, what the throne of Adonai is like, learn about the Mishkan. And of course, outside there was another veil that went into the court, and in the court was a laver of water and the altar of sacrifice. And this is, again, we've been studying a picture of the one in heaven. If you want to learn what heaven's like, don't listen to all these people that when they die, they see all this stuff. That's none of that is true. This is what is in heaven. This is an earthly model according to the book of Hebrews. Hebrews teaches us about that model. Now, in verse 5, we have the consecration of the Levites to minister. Now, the Levites are a tribe. The Levites are a tribe, the tribe of Levi. And Adonai set them apart. Now, within the Levites, one of the Levite families, the family of Aaron, became the priests. Now, all priests, all Cohen are Levites, but not all Levites are Kohanim. And so a Cohen is a priest that ministers inside to Adonai in the sacrifices. The Levites were the helpers. The Levites were like what today we have elders and we have deacons. The Levites are what we would call the deacons, the ministers, the servants of the temple. And everything that the priests needed, the Levites were the ones that did the work. Now, the Levites were divided into 3 sections, 3 sons, and they're the ones that did the major carrying, the setting up, when the cloud moved, as we're going to see in just a little while. When the cloud moved, all the Levites said, hey, we got to set, put everything in the wagons with oxen, and they carried everything. A special group of priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, but everything else, all the curtains, every part, the cedar wood, everything was transported by the Levites. And they pretty much had transportation business that was pretty much until the temples were built. And in the time of David, David started using the Levites for musicians and singers. So all the Levites became singers and musicians from the time of David on. Of course, they had that before also, but David actually wrote Psalms. And the book of Psalms is the book for the Levites for them to sing during temple times. And so over here we have the offering. The Levites are consecrated to minister, to work, to do all the work that needed to be done. Go with me to verse 16. You must purify them and offer them with a gesture of offering, because they have been made over to me from among the sons of Israel as oblates, as servants. They are to replace those who open the womb, all the firstborn of the sons of Israel. I have taken them for my own. All the firstborn of the sons of Israel, man and beast, do indeed belong to me. The day I struck all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, I consecrated them to myself. And now, in place of all the firstborn among the sons of Israel, I have taken the Levites. Now, before the golden calf incident in ancient times, how many of you here are firstborn? Firstborn males. Firstborn males. If you are a firstborn male in ancient times, you would be the priest of the home. And this was in the culture of the Hebrews. This was in pagan culture. Everybody, the firstborn son was the priest in the home. You were automatically a priest. But if you remember at the golden calf incident, when Israel was in partying and immorality, and Moses comes down with the tablets, and it was the Levites who had set themselves apart and did not participate. And it was the Levites that actually came against and stood on the side of Yahweh. And because of that, Moses says, you have won yourself an everlasting place as the firstborn. So from then on, the firstborn male of the family was no longer called to be the priest in the home. Now the Levites, and from the Levites, the family of Aaron became the priest, and Adonai set them apart to minister to him. Now, all the firstborn sons, because they are no longer a priest, have to now redeem themselves. And they redeem themselves by having 5 shekels of silver. And you would go to the priest. This is still done today in Israel. When I first went to Israel, I did it for myself. When I took my firstborn son to Israel, I did it for him. We went to the Western Wall, and we redeemed him there. And we do it here. How many have been redeemed over here? Okay, 1, 2. Those of you that were firstborn sons here that have been redeemed here, if you want to do that, it's called the Pirion Haben ceremony, and you bring 5 silver pieces, 5 in a sense, 5 shekels, and we do a redemption ceremony. But in place of the Levites, in place of the firstborn, the Levites were now consecrated to minister. Now, if you go to verse 23, the consecration of the Levites to minister from age 25 onwards, the Levite must exercise his ministry and do duty in the tent of meeting. After the age of 50, he is no longer bound to the ministry. He will have no further duties, but he will still help his brothers to ensure the services in the tent of meeting, though he himself is no longer any ministry. And so the work of a Levite, when a Levite became 25 years of age, then he started packing. Then he started working, carrying the loads, doing all the business of the sheep for the slaughters and the wood for all the major work of the Mishkan. The Levite was to do from 25 to 50. Now the priest from 30 to 50. The priest from 30 to 50, and the Levite from 25 to 50. And after you retired at 50, you're no longer able to work your duties. Now you could help the younger Levites after 50 and show them how to do it, teach them how to do it, but you didn't have no duties. Now, one of the most important things of today's Parsha is the second Passover. So go with me to Leviticus, to Numbers chapter 9. Now, remember what we said when we started Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, and in Spanish, it's easy to say because Los capítulos en el libro de Números están trocados. They are opposite. They are mixed up. Chapter 9 of Numbers is actually chapter 1. And chapter 1 of Numbers is towards the back after. Go with me to verse 1 of 9. Yahweh spoke to Moses in the wilderness in the second year after the Exodus in the second month. And so if you notice when we read Numbers chapter 1, in Numbers chapter 1, go with me, hold your finger here, and go with me to Numbers 1. In Numbers 1, it says there, Yahweh spoke to Moses in the wilderness, Bamidbar, of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month. So on the first day of the second month, it was the second month that they departed from the wilderness of Sinai. And so that means that chapter 9 is actually the real first chapter, and chapter 1 is actually chapter 9. But he spoke to them in the second year after the exodus from Egypt in the first month. Let the sons of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. Now, it was a year ago that Israel had left Goshen. It was a year ago that Israel had left Goshen. It took them 3 months. According to Exodus 19, it took them 3 months to get from Goshen to the wilderness of Sinai. It took them 3 months. On the third month, it says. Now, whether that means 90 days, 3 months inclusive, or whether it means a part of each, which would be 60 days, or 90 days, it took them to get from Goshen to Sinai. Now, 9 months it took from the time they get there. They receive the 10 Commandments. Moses goes up several times, receives 2 sets of commandments of stones. One he broke, and the other one had to be remade, 40 days each. And then when he comes in Parsha Teruma, they start building the tabernacle, if you remember. That means it took them 9 months to build the tabernacle. At this point where we're at right now is the tabernacle has already been built. The tabernacle is built. Everything is set up. And there's some little, what we call parenthesis chapters that talk about some of the stuff that had already been built, like the trumpets and some of those things. And so now they're ready to depart. After 1 year of being in Sinai, they're ready to depart. And from the departure in Sinai, about 110 miles north is the bottom of Israel. And next week we're going to say how they get to Israel. They could have been in the promised land. They could have been in the promised land from today, from where they're talking about here, within a 3-month period. But again, because of sin, they were not able to. But right before they depart, right before the departure, it's the first month of the year. And Moses was told by Adonai in Exodus 12 that you are to remember the Passover. So, over here, let the sons of Israel keep the Passover at the appointed time, at the Moed. Now, when is the Moed? The 14th of Aviv. the 14th day of this month, between the 2 evenings, at the appointed time, which is sundown, for you to keep it. You must keep it with all the mishpatim and hukim proper to it. And again, whatever your English Bible say there, with all the laws or statutes or rules or regulations or customs, the two words are mishpatim and hukim. You are to keep it according to the protocols. I like the word protocol. It's a more modern word, a more word that we could understand today. There are protocols for Passover. You can't just do what you want for Passover. You must keep it according to the protocols of the Passover. And then, verse 4, Moses gave orders for the sons of Israel to keep the Passover. They kept it in the wilderness of Sinai. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the 2 evenings, the sons of Israel did exactly, what did they do? Exactly as Yahweh had ordered Moses. So when we do Passover, we must do it exactly according to the protocols. Of course, there are some exemptions when you don't have a temple, and we'll discuss those in a moment. It happened, verse 6, it happened that certain men had become unclean by touching a dead body. They could not keep the Passover that day. Now, part of the protocol of Passover is you have to be in a clean state. You have to be ritually clean. No touching dead bodies, no metzorah, no anything that could cause you to be unclean. And so they couldn't do it. They came that same day to Moses and Aaron and said, we have become unclean by touching a dead body. And of course, this is natural. With all those million people that were in the wilderness of Sinai, every day people got old and many people died, and you have to go outside the camp and bury them. And so this was just a natural part. This is not sin. They were not committing sin. They just naturally got their grandparent and had to go bury him, but that would cause them to be ritually unclean. And so they couldn't do Passover. Now, even today, that's why when we do Passover, one of the things that we are told by Paul is you must examine yourself. Before you do Passover, before you eat the bread and drink the cup, you must examine yourself. Because the person that does not examine himself and eats the bread unworthily will be behaving unworthily towards the body and the blood of Messiah. So this cleanness and uncleanness, it's not just for Moses' time. Paul talks about it there in 1 Corinthians, that we must be in a state of what he calls worthiness. The actual word means approachableness to Adonai, to be of worth, to be clean in a sense, and not unclean unworthily. If you partake of the body and the blood unworthily, Paul says, not only will you be behaving unworthily towards his body and blood, he says, but that is why some of you have died and are weak or ill. So even in what we would call the new covenant, the gospel time, and a lot of people don't realize this, that yes, the wording is different from the time of the Tanakh to Paul's time, but it's still the same thing. When you partake of Passover in the first covenant, like when you take of Passover in the renewed covenant, it's not just going and taking a little piece of bread and a little cup of grape juice and that's it, se acabó. No, it's not like that. it's a ritual that Adonai gave to Moses that was to continue on in through the millennium. Even in the millennium, the Pesach, in fact, during the millennium, the Pesach is going to be celebrated in Jerusalem, and an actual lamb is going to be sacrificed, and people living in Jerusalem could partake of the Passover meal. Like it was in the time of Moses, like it was in the time of Yeshua, so will it be in the millennium. We don't have a temple today. The only reason we cannot participate in a full Passover meal with all three sections, with a section of the Korban Pesach, with a section of the Haggadah, and with a section of the Messianic banquet, the only reason we can't partake of the first part is because there's no temple. If there was a temple, we could partake. And in the millennium, those that will be living in the millennium will be able to partake of the Passover. And so these poor guys here, they couldn't do Passover because they had touched a dead body and they were unclean. So they come to Moses. Well, when people come to Moses, Moses goes to Adonai. And wait here, he says, and I will learn orders from Yahweh. Yahweh spoke to Moses in verse 10. If any among you, among your descendants, becomes unclean by touching a dead body, or is on a journey, or, again, this is for the future, or is on a journey abroad, he can still keep the Passover for Yahweh. Such persons will keep it in the second month on the 14th day between the two evenings. They are to eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Nothing of it must be left until morning, nor must they break any of its bones. They must keep the Passover exactly. How? Exactly according to the Paschal ritual, according to the ritual of Pesach. So here we have a couple of exemptions. If you are unclean, or if you're on a journey, you're outside of the land of Israel, you're outside of the land of Israel, you can keep it, and Adonai has provided, I guess what we would call today a makeup date. He has a makeup date, and the makeup date is not whenever you want. It's not whenever you want. The makeup date is actually 1 month later on the same day, the 14th of the second month. Instead of the 14th of the first month, the 14th of the second month. Exactly between the two evenings. Exactly according to the ritual. Exactly according to everything, every protocol of Pesach. So always remember, if for some reason you cannot keep Passover on the 14th of the first month, you can keep Passover on the 14th of the second month. And everything will be the same. It's the same Haggadah, the same understanding. Now, one of the most important things that we always, when talking about Passover and the date of Passover, that we have to share is the idea that when we do Passover, it's the 14th of the first month or the second month for the makeup one. It's not the 12th, the 13th. It's not the 18th. It's not on the earliest Sunday or Wednesday night. A lot of people have them when it's convenient for us. One of the understandings today of Western mentality is we want to do things according to our convenience. What's convenient to me? How can I participate when I want to? Rather than what does Adonai want? And so today, a lot of even Messianic synagogues, but definitely a lot of Christian churches are wanting to do Passover, but they're not doing a correct Passover. Part of it is that they're doing it whenever they want. Now, I have no problem of me or one of you, Elder Dave, or going to another congregation and teaching them about Messiah in the Passover. What did they do? How was it? That's okay. But to actually have an actual Passover, you have to do it. If you want to have an actual Passover, if you want to do a Seder, you have to do it according to the way it says in Torah. Let's continue here in verse 13. But if anyone is clean, in other words, if anyone is okay, no problems, they're at home and they're clean, there's nothing hindering. But if anyone is clean or has not had to go on a journey, but fails to keep the Passover, he shall be outlawed, excommunicated from his people. So look at that. If you don't participate in Passover because you don't want to, for whatever reason you don't participate, then technically you are excommunicated from the olive tree of Israel. You're excommunicated from the olive tree of Israel. Now, remember, there was not only the 12 tribes here, but there was a mixed multitude. There was Gentiles here. So we're talking here not only to the Jews, but we're talking to the Gentiles. From the time of Moses till today and going on through the millennium. These are not changeable. The new covenant does not make the first covenant obsolete. The new covenant continues the first covenant. It's a better covenant. The new covenant is a better covenant, or else Adonai wouldn't have renewed it. And what makes the new covenant better, as we've been saying, especially now as we're specifically talking about Pentecost and Shavuot, is that the new covenant, the Ruach HaKodesh, has been inserted, has been put into us. So now we could keep the first covenant, not with the covenant above us, but with the covenant inside of us, with the power. And you shall receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses. And so anyone who can keep Passover but doesn't want to, or I don't know how Adonai, I am not the judge, and I don't know how Adonai is going to do it. We welcome the judge, but I'm not the judge, and he's the judge, and I don't know how he's going to do it. And I ask for mercy and compassion whenever I think of this type. Let me reveal my heart to you. My heart breaks that for many years I didn't know these things. Many years I wasn't aware of these things. And we were never taught these things. And now my eyes have been opened to all this. But my heart breaks that there's so many believers out there, so many sincere believers in all the congregations that are still participating in man-made Holy Communions, Eucharist, man-made masses that have been inserted into biblical faith, into the new covenant. And they're not participating in Pesach. They're not participating in the once-a-year Passover with the Messianic banquet of Yeshua. But what does it say here? If anyone is clean, and we've been made clean by Yeshua, but then does not participate in, is there an automatic excommunication that they're all walking under? Maybe is that why the body of Messiah, the churches that are out there, denominational, is that why there's so much weakness and illness, and some have died, like Paul says? I don't know. But I do know one thing. Adonai is merciful and compassionate to those with a sincere heart. But Adonai is going to be just to the pastors, the teachers, the seminary professors that are not teaching the truth, that are not exposing their people to the Passover, that are not allowing people to study. And sometimes people have mentioned, in fact, a person mentioned to one of our men here about their pastor does not let them watch some of the stuff on Messianic, or they were encouraged to watch us on YouTube, and oh no, our pastor would not allow us to watch Pastor Otero. Well, wait a second. That right there, you know what? You guys are allowed to do whatever you want. I'm not going to stop you. Just have discernment. Just pray to the Holy Spirit, and be careful. But I can't say, oh, I don't want you, because, one thing about me is that I don't know everything, so I even have to study, because I want to know, I want to study more. But I have to be careful. I have to have discernment, know the word first before I even start studying. Know the word first. But this verse really I still have not reached a good understanding. Adonai, how are you going to treat, especially the pastors that are teaching other stuff, that are actually doing rituals that Yeshua did not command? Let me tell you, Yeshua did not command the Mass, what people called the Mass. He did not command that. He did not command the Lord's table in Protestant churches, or whatever people called in the different evangelical churches, with the little piece of bread and the little cup. Yeshua didn't command that. Yeshua had nothing to do with that. That is a 2,000-year man-made progressive. That's progressive, because at one time it was this, and then it's changed, and every denomination, everybody does it differently, whenever they want, every week, every month, every 6 weeks, and the boards that's a bunch of nonsense, real nonsense. We have to come to true sense, to true wisdom, and wisdom lies here. Let's go on. He has failed. He has not brought the offering to Yahweh at its appointed time. And he must bear the burden of his sin. That's what Paul says. That's exactly what Paul says. If a gerim, if a proselyte is living with you and keeps a Passover for Yahweh, look at that, and keeps a Passover for Yahweh, he must keep it according to the mishpatim and chukim of the Passover. There is to be one law, one chukim, among settler and native alike. So when a foreigner comes to Israel and decides to be a proselyte, besides a gerim, not just a foreign visitor, not just someone who wants to live here, but someone who wants to partake of Israel. Then he must follow the same hukim, the same mishpatim that the native follows. The Gerim must follow the same thing because there's only one hukim, there's one Torah. Another place, Moses says, there's one Torah for native and for Gerim, for proselyte. Today, people are teaching a doctrine called dual covenant that says Adonai blesses or saves or blesses the Jews by following Torah and the Gentiles by following Yeshua. Well, it's wrong. There is no such thing as one law for the Jew and another law for the Gentile. There's only one Torah. There's only one hukim, one mishpatim. The hukim and the mishpatim for both are the same. Now, we're talking here about saved Gentiles, Gentiles that are part of Israel. A Gerim is a Gentile that has decided to convert and be part of Israel. And it's one law. Technically, in this congregation right now, and those of you that are believers in Yeshua, everyone here, you are the olive tree of Israel. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Gentile. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, if you're rich or poor. None of that matters to Adonai. What matters is that once you are baptized in Messiah Yeshua, once you're baptized in Messiah Yeshua, then you become the sons of Abraham. You are Ben Abraham, and you are his sons and daughters. You are of the one family and one Torah, one mishpatim, one hukim in everything, whether it's Passover or the other holy days. One mishpatim governs both of us together, not one for the Jews and one for the Gentiles. No, it's one. And it says it right there. What could be, right there it says it. And so the first Passover was in Egypt, in Goshen. And then the second Passover, the one we're talking about here in Exodus, in Numbers 9, is at Sinai. And then the subsequent Passovers, we don't have any time that they celebrated Passover for the next 40 years, but because Adonai says you will do it, I'm sure they did it. But the next Passover that we look is what we call the Gilgal Passover, and that's Joshua's Passover. As soon as Joshua crossed over the Jordan, one of the first things they do is they have Passover. So from the second Passover, the one we're talking about now, all the new explanations about the makeup Passover and everything is to continue to subsequent Passovers for the next 40 years, and Joshua's Passover when they come into the land, and from Joshua to Solomon when the temple's built, and to the time of Yeshua, the same Passover have occurred. Now, from here, we have a couple of things. The getting ready for departing Sinai, they do Passover on the first month. On the second month, they start getting ready to depart. But on verse 15 of chapter 9, we talk about the cloud. Now, the cloud, this next section is what I would call a parenthesis sections. Always remember, when you read Torah or when you read Scripture, pretty much you're reading it in chronological order. Every so often, you have chronology that for whatever reason is set up in different orders. But many times you have parentheses chapters or parentheses section. This parentheses section is from verse 15 to verse 23. And it's just talking about the cloud. they've already talked about the cloud, and they're going to talk about the cloud again later on. But again, in a parentheses manner, he just brings out the cloud. On the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. That was about a month ago chronologically. And the tent of testimony, from nightfall until morning, it remained over the tabernacle under the appearance of fire. So what we call the cloud is also the fire. So think of this. At night, the cloud turned into fire. And in the day, the fire turned into a cloud. And then again, back to fire, back to cloud, back to fire, back to cloud. Now, interesting enough, that's just what naturally, what in nature we would know. Because the desert, the wilderness, the desert over there, in the day it is hot. It is so hot that without water, you've seen probably TV shows or movies in the desert, in the Sahara, you could walk 2-3 miles and be dead. In Death Valley, in fact, here in New Mexico, we have what's called La Jornada del Muerto, the Journey of the Dead. And it's when you get off the side of the river and want to go straight, you go through this wilderness area here, La Jornada, the Journey del Muerto, of the dead. And many people have died there by going through that trek because it is so hot. But one thing about the desert, at night, the desert is cold. It is freezing cold. So think of this. Look how Adonai thinks of everything. In the day, he gave us an umbrella. He gave us an umbrella. So throughout the day, we didn't have the hot sun to beat on our ancestors. The hot sun, there was an umbrella, a cloud. And wherever they went, when the cloud got up, all of a sudden they just followed the cloud. And when the cloud stopped, they stopped. But at night, in the coldness of night, that cloud became a fire, a radiator, if you will, over the Israelites. Just like when you walk into a store in winter today, as soon as you're walking, you're cold, but then you walk into that store, say you walk into Lowe's, and all of a sudden there's some radiators on top, and right away you feel the heat. In a sense, think of over 1 million people in the desert and a cloud and a fire. And the cloud lifted, and it turned into fire. When the cloud halted, Israel stopped. And so right there, it tells you about all that. And then we come to chapter 10, the trumpets, right before they depart, right before the departure. He teaches them about, we have these silver trumpets, and they also had some ram's horns, some shofar, but the silver trumpets were to assemble, and there he tells you when to do it. Verse 5, when a trumpet blast is accompanied by a battle cry, and the camps pitched to the east shall set out, the second blast by a battle cry, the camp. So how they, even broke camp was by the sound, if you see there, of the trumpets. Verse 7, but to assemble the community, the trumpets shall be sounded without battle cry. So when the trumpets are sounded, all of a sudden there is assembly. Again, you're to do in verse 10, at your festivals, solemnities, new moons, at the time of the year, Holocaust, during, whenever you want to remember, they will call you to remember of Elohim. The sound of the trumpet, whether it's the silver trumpets of the priests or the shofar of the people, because the priests had the 2 trumpets, silver, and the people had the ram's horns. They remind you, they are a reminder of Elohim. So whenever you hear, whenever you blow the trumpet, it's a reminder like the seats of Elohim. And then verse 11, in the second year, verse 10, chapter 10, verse 11, the people leave Sinai on the 20th day of the second month of the second year, and they went through the wilderness of Paran. Now, what I did over here is Goshen. Here is where they crossed the Red Sea, and they came down to Jebel Musa. Jebel Musa is the traditional site of Mount Sinai. Of course, and I put this one also because this is a possible Mount Sinai, Jebel Allah's. And so there are two sites, the traditional site in Mount Sinai. This is the Sinai Peninsula. And this is not the Sinai Peninsula. This is Saudi Arabia. This is Arabia. But there's some people that say that this is the site. I still have not made up my mind because definitely there's a lot of problems with this one. And part of the problem with this one is the chronology. Because it takes 3 days from Goshen, 3 days to cross the Red Sea, and then 3 months to get over here. In this, it takes 3 days to go from here to cross the Red Sea, if this is the Red Sea, but from crossing the Red Sea to Jebel Allah's takes 3 months. That's my biggest problem. 3 days, 3 months. 3 days, 3 months. And so the route from the traditional site, which is 110 miles, is to Eisengeber, then here to Kadesh Barnea. Now the Jebel Allah's is 120 miles. So this is 110 miles, this is 120 miles, walking about 11 miles, 12 miles a day with that many people. And here is Kadesh Barnea, where they get ready for next week's Parsha. We're going to start here as they send a reconnaissance to the promised land. So this is the route, either from traditional Sinai to Kadesh Barnea or Jebel Allah's to Kadesh Barnea. So there are some halts in the wilderness. One of the things that happens is as they take off, there's a struggle, what I call a struggle for the promised land. Mechar Sinai al Kadesh Barnea, from the Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. And there's several halts. There's complaints. There's a meeting between Moses and Yahweh, the giving of the quails, the situation with Miriam and Aaron. And then they arrive at Kadesh, Kadesh Barnea. And so let's look at some of these over here. Go to chapter 11. And again, they take off on the march. They set up a marching order. They get the Ark of the Covenant, actually in chapter 10, verse 33. And they set out from the mountain of Yahweh and journeyed for 3 days. The Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh went at their head for the journey for those days, searching out for a camping place for them. And now chapter 11, verse 1. Now the people set up a lament, a cry, which was offensive to Yahweh's ears. And Yahweh heard it. Again, think of this. When we cry out and in anger or unforgiveness or whatever, remember, Adonai hears it. Adonai hears everything. He hears our hearts. We don't even have to speak it out. We don't have to be angry outward. If Adonai hears, and Adonai heard it, and his anger blazed. And the fire of Yahweh burned among them. It destroyed one end of the camp. The people appealed to Moses, and he interceded with Yahweh, and the fire died down. So the place was called Taberah, because the fire of Yahweh had burned among them. Now, what was the complaint? I don't know. Nobody knows what the complaint was. They were just complaining. Have you known people that are complainers? You know, it's like complaining is what they do. They love complaining. They live in complaining, I guess, makes them happy. And so a lot of the people were complaining about whatever. And whatever they said, whatever they did was offensive to Adonai. And Adonai had to bring a judgment. He brought a judgment of fire, and part of the camp was burnt. And all of a sudden, they appealed. And Adonai heard it. Now watch this. The rubble. Now, not only the people, that was Israelite people from the tribes. Maybe one of the tribes. But now the rubble, who's the rubble? The rubble is what's called the mixed multitude. And these were Gentiles. These were slaves. Because remember, when Israel as the slaves were left, they were among other slaves. Israel was not the only slaves that the Egyptians had. They also had Nubians and people from all the other African or Arabian, other people groups, Libyans and other people groups that they had made slaves. And so when Israel got free, all these people thought that they could hang on to, in a sense, Moses' code, and they left with him. But now, the mixed multitude, esta gente, who had joined Ha'am, the people of Israel, were overcome by greed. And the sons of Israel themselves began to wail again. Who will give us meat? Queremos carne. Esas carnitas. Esos tacos al pastor. To eat, they said. Think of the fish, los mariscos. Think of the fish we used to eat free in Egypt, free mariscos, free fish. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. Here we are wasting away, stripped of everything. Think of it, we're wasting away. We're getting slimmer and trimmer. Nothing but manna to eat. Look at us. Look at that. Look, all we have is manna. Manna pancakes. Manna, manna was like, what's that thing that they have nowadays that they can make anything out of it that tastes like meat? Tofu. Manna was like tofu. You could make it into whatever you want, and it was like that. All we have is manna. All we have is tofu, in a sense. From heaven. Bread from heaven. And they started complaining. Now, he gives an introduction there of what is manna. Manna is like coriander seed with the appearance of Bethlehem. And the people gathered around and they ground it at the mill. They crushed it. They cooked it in a pot, or they made it into pancakes. It tasted like cake made with oil. When the dew fell, at nighttime the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people's wailing. Every family at the door of his tent. The anger of Yahweh flared out, and Moses greatly worried over this. and he spoke to Yahweh. Remember, personally, he would go to Yahweh in the tent and speak cara a cara, face to face with Yahweh. Now, Adonai had just judged a part of the camp. Now Moses is worried. Now everybody's complaining, not just that group, but everybody's complaining. And so he goes and has a meeting with Yahweh. And he starts talking to him, the weight of the nation, the weight of leadership was really on Moses because, yes, he was the spokesman for Adonai, but remember, he was just a spokesman for Adonai. The people here, they would bring their complaints to him. They wouldn't bring their complaints to Adonai. Who do you bring your complaints to? Do you bring your complaints to Adonai, or do you give your complaints to whoever is over you or with you or among you or your friend? Or everybody complains to everybody. But wait a second, whenever we have a problem, we need to bring ourselves completely to Adonai. This is a prime example. This is an excellent lesson of how we should be today. You have a complaint? Adonai, I have this complaint. Be truthful to him. I have this problem. I have this situation. I need your help. No. Yes, you could appeal to authority, but you don't complain to them. You come and question, how could we solve this? Not complain. They complained to Moses. And Adonai says to Moses in verse 16, gather 70 elders of Israel, are to be people, elders, and scribes. Bring them to the tent of meeting and let them stand there, and I will come down and speak with you, and I shall take some of the Spirit which is on you and put it on them. Now remember, there was already elders or judges that were taking care of a lot of the complaints. But even with that, elders that, remember, Jethro told Moses to do that. And so now a Sanhedrin is set up. This is the beginning of what we would call the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is 70 elders. And by the way, there should be no congregation with a single pastor. No congregation should have a single pastor. A congregation should be made up of elders in the Torah and in the apostolic writings. Especially Paul shows us how to have a congregation, still with elders. And of course, Israel had a Sanhedrin of 3, a Sanhedrin of 25, and the Sanhedrin of 70. And it was like a lower court, a middle court, and a Supreme Court. The Sanhedrin was the Supreme Court. And so Adonai sets up this Sanhedrin, this court system. And over here, he gets some of the Spirit that Moses' responsibility as a leader, the weight of leadership was now transferred on these 70 men. And of course, there was the other judges, and every tribe also had leading men of the tribes. So there was a lot of leadership besides the judges and besides the Sanhedrin, and there were other leaders as well. And so in verse 24, and the Spirit is given to the elders, and Yahweh came down in the cloud, and he spoke to them. Took some of the Spirit and added it to the 70 elders. When the Spirit came on them, they prophesied, but not again. So all of a sudden, when the Spirit came, they prophesied. This is almost like a little Pentecost, a little taste of Pentecost. And they prophesied, these 70 men. But after that, they didn't speak again. And Moses continued to be the main prophet and the main spokesman. In verse 31, a wind came from Yahweh and drove quails in from the sea and brought them down on the camp. And they lay for a distance of a day's march on either side of the camp, 2 cubits thick on the ground. The people were up all day and night, all the next day collecting quails. The least gathered by anyone was 10 omers, something like 30 pounds. And they spread them out around the camp. The meat was still in between their teeth, not even chewed, when the anger of Yahweh blazed out against the people, and Yahweh struck them with a great plague. And so here they did not want no more manna. We want meat. We want something to put in our mouth. And so he gave them quails. He brought quails in from the sea and the seashores, and they came and they were packed on the ground, like 2 feet high. So they got as much as they wanted, and they gave them to everybody, and they got their fires, their little roasters, and got their little barbecue grills out, and they started barbecuing them. And as soon as a plague. Now, a lot of people don't like Torah because they say, especially Marcion, the one that came up with the term Old Testament, said, the God, Yahweh, the God of Moses, the God of the Old Testament, was a mean God. But the God of the New Testament, Jesus, is a good God. So he thought there was actually 2 gods. There isn't. Because of verses like this. But one of the most important things that Adonai, especially sometimes when we are younger, sometimes if we go astray, we need a little bit more discipline. The problem today is nobody disciplines anybody. And so everybody has become almost undisciplinable. And Adonai loves his people. He has compassion on us. But remember, what Paul says, or actually what the book of Hebrews says, if you think Elohim was hard in the first covenant, he's going to be harder in the renewed covenant. In the New Testament, Adonai is harder. A lot of people don't see that. They gave the name of the place Keres HaTa'ava, because it was there that they buried the people who had indulged their greed. And the greedy people. Now, it wasn't the normal people. It wasn't the regular people. It wasn't the people who were following. It was the greedy people. Greed brings judgment. Greed brings judgment. Greed brings judgment. And so when there's greed, this person here is greedy. Adonai is going to bring judgment. Chapter 12. Miriam and Aaron too also, también, spoke against Moses in connection with the Cushite woman he had taken, for he had married a Cushite woman. Now, he was married to Zephora, had a couple of sons by Zephora. We don't know what happened to Zephora, if she died. We know that she was part of the Exodus, and then afterwards, because of war, he sent her back with his father-in-law for her safety and the safety of the little boys. But we don't know what happened to Zephora, if she died or what. But Moses marries a Cushite woman, a black woman, a woman from Cush. Now, Miriam and Aaron didn't like this. Moses' sister and brother. Now, it wasn't Aaron and Miriam. It was Miriam and Aaron in this case. And they said, has Yahweh spoken to Moses only? Yes, he has. Has he spoken to us also? Yes, he did. He has several times. Yahweh heard this. Now Moses was the most humble of men, the humblest man on earth. So Moses wouldn't take up the battle himself. He always, remember, came to Adonai. He gave his complaints to Adonai. But here, Miriam and Aaron come with what's called Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara. The Lashon Hara means the evil tongue. The evil tongue. And they came complaining, has Adonai only spoken to Moses? And because of that, Adonai brought, he says, come to the tent to meet the three of you. I want to have a meeting with the three of you. So now, Yahweh speaks to the three of them. If any man among you is a prophet, I make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is at home in my house, and I speak to him panaim al panaim, face to face, plainly and not in riddles. And he sees the form, the glory of Elohim. How then have you dared to speak against my servant? The anger of Yahweh blazed out against them, and he departed. And as soon as the cloud withdrew from the tent, there was Miriam, Saraat, white as snow. Aaron turned to look at her, and she had become Saraat. Remember, a leper. But this isn't Hansen's disease, leprosy. Remember, we talked about that when we had the chapter on Saraat. Saraat is a leprosy of Lashon Hara. There is a leprosy that is Hansen's disease, and that's a regular medical disease. But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about if you are a gossiper, a slanderer, there's a special judgment on slanderers and gossipers. And what Miriam did here, Lashon Hara, that is called Saraat. And Saraat is a skin disease, like a rash. And hers was so bad that from the top of her head to the bottom, she had it all over. Sometimes people would get it in the scab or in the face, in the stomach. But in this case, throughout her whole body. Aaron said to Moses, help me, my Lord, my Adon. Do not punish me for a sin committed in folly, in foolishness. We were fooling around. It was foolish, of which we are guilty. I entreat her, let her not be like a monster, a zombie, coming from its mother's womb with flesh half corrupted. Moses cried to Yahweh, O Elohim, please heal her, I beg you. Then Yahweh said to Moses, if her father and mother had no more than spit on her face, she would not be a thing of shame, but for 7 days, let her be shut outside the camp. And for 7 days, then, you could bring her in. Then the people left Hasaroth and came and pitched their camp in the wilderness of Paran before Kadesh Barnea. And so they arrive at Kadesh. There's all these halts in the wilderness, all this. There's a struggle. They're going to the promised land, but especially between now, yes, there was struggles going to Sinai, but the struggle now going to the promised land, we're going to see, especially in the book of Numbers, is going to be very high. We were going to talk about Shavuot Pentecost. Here's a mikvah where they were. We'll continue our teaching next week. Let's go ahead and stand before Adonai. Father, in this life, our journey, there are struggles. Father, there are people here in our congregation who are struggling with different situations in their lives. Life is a journey. Life is a struggle. And yes, there's many complaints. There's many situations that we have problems with, Father. And I pray that even right now, that your Ruach HaKodesh might allow us, instead of complaining, instead of making, even inside, even in our hearts, that we will learn, Father, to come to you, to bring our struggles to you, Father, to bring our complaints to you, to bring our problems to you. Because now, Father, because of Pentecost, you have given us your Ruach, your Spirit. We're not alone. We don't have a Torah over us. We have a Torah inside of us. Father, and through your Ruach inside of us, Father, by your mercy, compassion, we could fix things. Things could be fixable because we have you. We have resurrection power. We have Holy Spirit power. We're not alone. We're not orphans. We have a Father. We have a Messiah. We have a Ruach. Bless your people. Yeberechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha. Air Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha. Vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Amen. Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.